Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
Offside.
Was an adult old-timers hockey team.
Players from BC travel to Alberta, bring back COVID, and spread it in their interior community. Also,
COVID-19 is in British Columbia. We are in the midst of a global pandemic. There is no safe place.
The Premier's message to rural areas as active cases outside the Lower Mainland double every 5 days. And
anywhere between 70 and 100 packages per day. So it's a lot.
Perfect, thank you.
Parcel pileup. Apartment buildings inundated with deliveries and a mad scramble to keep up.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight. Well, more tragic news. For the 9th straight day, BC is staring down double-digit deaths due to COVID-19.
Sadly, another 12 people have died from the virus in our province in the past 24 hours. BC's total death toll has now reached 469. Today's daily case count, 834 new test positives in BC. Hospitalizations are up by 1 to 337, but still an all-time high. The number of people in critical care is also slightly up to 79. Active cases are slowly rising as we near the 9,000 mark.
There are just over 10,200 people being monitored as a result of identified exposure to known cases. BC is now approaching 35,000 total cases. And of today's new cases, upwards of 63% of them are once again in the Fraser Health region.
And with the uptick in COVID-19 cases, once again, Dr. Henry alluded to more restrictions in some areas.
And she spoke about how many are following the orders in place right now, but some are still not. Our Zara Premji joins us live in studio with more on this. So Zara, what exactly did Dr. Henry have to say?
Well, Tanya, I think it's key to note first that there were a range of emotions today, a hint of optimism for what's to come, and we'll get to that soon, but also a lot of disappointment in those just not following the orders. With a tired voice herself, Henry acknowledged the fatigue that everyone is feeling in one way or another, but she said now is not the time to cave into that. She revealed a prime example of just why not. A hockey team that didn't follow the rules, and now dozens are paying the price for it in the interior. She says, quote, an old-timers hockey team from BC's interior felt it was important to continue their travels, and so they did. They went to Alberta and brought back COVID. And she says, sadly, this isn't a unique situation. In this particular case, we're now in the second and third chains of transmission of the virus.
Nobody intended to do this, and I know that people feel like, oh, it'll be okay, we've not had any virus here, we'll be fine. But this is just another cautionary tale that right now you cannot take these types of license from the restrictions that we've put in place for all of our safety. It was several dozen families that were affected, several businesses that were affected, long-term care that was affected.
Now, speaking of adult sports, Dr. Henry is imposing new restrictions on all indoor adult team sports. Now, this includes basketball, cheerleading, martial arts, floor and ice hockey, as well as soccer, skating, squash, and volleyball, among others. And when it comes to structured child and youth programs, well, Henry says they are allowed, but must follow the Via Sport Phase 2 requirements. Mike.
All right, Zara, and a lot of disappointment, I think, from many today about this, but you did mention earlier there's some optimism of what's to come. What did Dr. Henry have to say about vaccine potentials here at home?
Exactly, you're right. It's fair to say Dr. Henry's face did light up with optimism, and it rung in her voice when she spoke about how the UK has approved a vaccine. When asked what she wants for Christmas, she even asked for the obvious gift we know she's going to hold out for, a vaccine. But Henry and Health Minister Adrian Dix both say they'll be following public health advice on how to distribute it and when it arrives.
Have no mandatory immunization programs in this country and in this province, and we do not expect that COVID immunization will be mandatory either. Having said that, there are some key positions where we know the risk of transmission in long-term care, for example, in some healthcare settings, can be very high. So we will be strongly encouraging everybody in those settings to be immunized.
And she says if you have plans to go to a long-term care facility and you're not immunized, then look at other things to do. Don't go there. Henry says the vaccine is a clear focus, and she says the province has been talking to the Red Cross and the Department of National Defence for vaccine distribution. In the meantime, she says decisions on possible new orders or extensions of the existing ones will be made on Monday. That's when the current orders hit their December 7th deadline. Mike, Tanya.
All right, thanks so much, Zara. That's our Zara Primji reporting live. And coming up later in the show, our Justin McElroy will take a look at rising cases of COVID-19 in the Northern Island and Interior Health regions. Those areas had largely been spared from the virus until now, but they're seeing double-digit cases daily at this point, and positivity rates are creeping up in more rural areas too. So he'll break down where exactly this is happening and why.
And with COVID-19 cases mounting in northern BC, hospital intensive care units are filling up. So much so that this week, 2 patients had to be transferred to intensive care at Royal Jubilee Hospital in Victoria. Transferring patients isn't unforeseen. It's a practice permitted under the province's pandemic response plan. And Island Health has room for the time being.
They've been inundated. They've had quite a few admissions to their hospital, including to their ICU. And their referral process is generally to Prince George, but Prince George, I understand, is now at capacity.
And Dr. Forrest says there is general fear that as cases rise, they are going to be in trouble. And medical staff with Island Health worry they won't have enough resources if cases continue to go up. Today, the province reported 45 new cases in the Northern Health region and 20 for Island Health.
A Vancouver Island man has been hit with back-to-back fines for COVID-19 violations after he was spotted in Greater Victoria businesses without a mask twice in one day.
We actually just need a stand on a square.
This video captures the first incident on Monday. The 40-year-old is seen in a Starbucks without a mask and refusing to comply with staff. RCMP say he was ticketed after the video later surfaced online. That's when officers realized they had ticketed the same man later that day after a similar scene unfolded at a gas station. He now faces a total of $460 in fines and is set to appear in court for causing a disturbance.
Shows of solidarity continue across the Lower Mainland in support of farmers in India. They are pushing back against new laws they say will make it easier for companies to exploit millions of agricultural workers.
They've been met with police blockades and violence. The streets of New Delhi have been taken over by tens of thousands of protesters over the past week. Our Greg Rasmussen shows us they've got support now from Canada.
Hundreds gathered to show their solidarity with farmers battling the government in India.
The green is everybody going to be wearing today. That represents the land. That represents the fields. That represents the crops. That represents the farmers that are on the streets asking for their rights.
This was just a pure outpouring of emotion of people. Most of our families, our cousins, our brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, for many people here, are actually sitting on the front lines in Delhi right now. So it's a very deep connection to us.
Tens of thousands of farmers have taken to the streets in India, met by water cannons, police blockades, and tear gas. New laws deregulating the sector passed by the Indian government in September sparked the protests. Farmers fear the removal of guaranteed prices and other free market moves will destroy small landowners. This farmer vows protests will continue, saying, "Accept our demands. If you don't accept it, we will continue the agitation." This week, Canadian opposition leaders and the Prime Minister voiced their concern.
Canada will always be there to defend the right of peaceful protest. We've reached out through multiple means directly to the Indian authorities to highlight our concerns.
India's External Affairs Ministry said comments from Canadian leaders were ill-informed and unwarranted, especially when pertaining to the internal affairs of a democratic country. About 1.4 million Canadians have their roots in India. Gary Saran's family runs this farm.
The smaller farmers get destroyed, their livelihoods get impacted, they fall further into debt.
He says protests here give an emotional boost to family members on the front lines in India. Greg Rasmussen, CBC News, Surrey.
A fourth person has been charged in the Remembrance Day shooting of Andrew Baldwin. This was in Surrey last year. Homicide investigators have announced Manroop Hare has been charged with first-degree murder. He is well known to police in the Lower Mainland. Baldwin was killed at a house on 124th Street near Old Yale Road just weeks after his brother was killed. Today, officers read out a statement from Baldwin's mother, Julie McDonald.
Andrew had a great sense of humor with an infectious laugh. Andrew was a caring, giving person, and his loyalty to his family, friends, loved ones, and co-workers was unwavering.
Jordan Bottomley and Jeg Paul Houthi have already been charged with first-degree murder in the case.
TransLink's TAP payment is down for a second straight day as it investigates what's being called suspicious network activity. TransLink says the suspicious activity has impacted some of its information technology systems. Out of caution, it cut access to some online services. That means transit users can't use debit or credit cards at fare gates and Compass vending machines for the time being. The company has also suspended its trip planner tool. TransLink says riders can still use cash at vending machines, and staff will be on site to help customers purchasing fares.
Well, more and more people are turning to online shopping this holiday season as the pandemic forces us to spend more time at home.
As Tina Lovegreen tells us, more parcels means more work for front desk staff and buildings scrambling to keep up with all those packages.
Perfect, thank you.
Delivered straight to your door. Online shopping has become the go-to during the pandemic. Avoid the malls and shop from the comfort of your own home.
This is kind of our overflow area.
But it's translated into a busy time for those managing all those incoming parcels.
We're probably getting close to that 100 package range, on average, anywhere between 70 and 100 packages per day. So it's a lot. And as I mentioned, because it's going into a computer system, you could say that every package, takes about 5 minutes.
Boxes piling up in some buildings. Some reporting a 100% increase in the number of packages they accept on behalf of residents.
Some buildings are receiving so many packages, they've decided not to accept any at all. Others are putting in size restrictions, while some stratas, those who can afford it, are hiring dedicated staff.
So there's actually now Monday to Friday a 4-hour package shift. And that's all that person does is receive packages, log packages, and be prepared to hand them out.
It's no surprise that the folks making the actual deliveries are also slammed.
More busy than usual. Yeah, compared to next year.
Canada Post says it's expecting a huge increase in parcel volume this holiday season, so it's adding 4,000 more temporary seasonal employees and adding 1,000 more delivery trucks to get the job done.
We're expecting Canada Post anytime, and they'll deliver probably another 30 to 50 packages today.
As for how residents can help with the mountain of packages that are piling up, pick up your parcels as soon as you can. Tina Lovegreen, CBC News, Vancouver.
A break-and-enter suspect is in custody tonight, and an RCMP officer is safe after a rather bizarre foot chase through the Boundary region last night. It ended with the pair trapped deep in a frigid ravine. Look at that. The two needed to be hoisted out by a rescue helicopter. It all began when officers responded to a break-and-enter call at a property in Bridesville. 4 people wound up being arrested. Another took off running and jumped into a snowy ravine with an officer close behind. After quite the chase, the suspect was caught and arrested. But by then, the two were trapped 400 feet down the ravine, and hypothermia was starting to set in. Officers scrambled to rescue them from the ground, but they couldn't, so a chopper was called in all the way from CFB Comox. After hours in the cold, the pair was eventually lifted out one by one. The officer didn't need medical attention, but the suspect was taken to the hospital and remains in police custody.
Like something you'd see in a movie or
wow.
something like that. Yeah.
Chilly night, too.
Yeah, for sure. You don't hear about good old-fashioned foot chases very often anymore.
Not much.
But this one for sure. Okay, let's bring in meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe now with our first check of the forecast. Up in Bridesville, you could see in those shots there, they were getting some Snow, but for us here on the coast, it's where it belongs, up on the mountains. Another chilly day today, though.
Yes, in fact, yeah, we did see some frost on the grass here, and puddles were frozen over. You can ask my 1.5-year-old that he can confirm puddles freeze over in the morning with these temperatures. Let's take a look at where we're at tonight, dropping quickly. In fact, as soon as we lose that sun, we went from a 7 at YVR to a 3, and now we are down to a 1. So this is going to be one of our cooler evenings yet, hitting the freezing mark across much of the south coast. High pressure is our story, and that's what led to a bit of an inversion this morning, and that widespread fog to kick things off that really then got confined to the inlet until about 10 or 11 a.m. You can actually see the clockwise flow in the clouds wrapping up around the coast and then down across Alberta and Saskatchewan, where this is bringing our heat, well, south of the border heat, to places like Calgary and Medicine Hat over the next couple of days. They'll be hitting the mid to high teens. We're cold but clear until tomorrow afternoon. Watch as I take you through the overnight forecast here. I'm stopping you Thursday morning, where we do have increasing clouds. Our high pressure ridge shifts a little too far to the east, allowing a little low pressure system to bring some cloud to us. At this point, I think the showers will stay confined to the island and the Sunshine Coast, kind of getting down as far as maybe Nanaimo in and across the island, but most of the models keeping us dry. Maybe a little bit of a drizzle Thursday night into Friday before high pressure realizes it's drifted too far east and makes its turn back into BC. So I've got a good looking long range forecast after we get through our blip tomorrow. More details ahead.
All right, we'll look forward to that. Thanks, Joe. Talk to you again in a bit. And a reminder, you can also watch this newscast live on CBC Gem.
And CBC Vancouver is also on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram.
A COVID-19 vaccine has been approved in Britain, and people there will start getting their shots next week. Coming up, why the news is being greeted with a measure of caution.
And a shocking and somewhat terrifying request from Alberta to Ottawa. CBC News has learned that province has asked the feds for field hospitals. What that means as their case numbers surge, next. Well, thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream.
Well, 2 days, dozens of wood pallets, lots of shoveling, and even more ambition. That is what it took a Nipawin teen to bring his dreams of a backyard rink to life.
15-year-old Cohen Morin built his first outdoor rink last winter. This year was all about the upgrades. Take a look.
I just felt it was too small and there was no boards, so I couldn't shoot the puck around, only at the net. And if I did miss or not catch it or whatever, the puck would just go into the snow, couldn't find it, lost some pucks. It was just really annoying. When we were thinking of making a bigger rink this year, my brother thought of using pallets as boards. I got them from my work at No Frills. I asked my boss and he said I can use as many as I need. Well, it took a couple days. I started one day putting out the pallets, lining them all up. And then halfway through that, I started putting in the boards to hold in the ice. And I started screwing everything together. I got a couple corners up, and then night came and I had to stop. The next day I finished it up, put the liner in, and started filling it with water. Last year, I just used a cooler, filled it with hot water, and I used a towel, and I just slowly dragged it around. So that took a bit. And this year, I started doing the same thing. It's taking even longer, but it gets it nice and smooth. But I want to make my own little manual Zamboni thing with some PVC pipe. So hopefully I can do that soon.
It's definitely not a skill that I have, so it's really nice to see him pick up that side of things, and it's been a lot of fun watching him learn and get creative and build all these kind of neat things, and very, very proud.
Well, I think building it was fun, but I think the skating on it is going to be even more fun. because I get to do a lot more than what I did last year, and last year was pretty fun.
Hockey is very much a big part of our lives. And now that when we're not at the big rink, now we have this rink that we can go to.
Pretty impressive.
Quite the resourceful, what do we say, it's 15? Resourceful guy there. You're big into hockey, nice born and bred Canadian activity. You've never done that, have you?
One of these indoor activities that's now going to be banned as we go through. No, you know, growing up here in Metro Vancouver, it was so rare to have it cold enough to make an outdoor rink. But,
that's true, yes.
They are fun.
They are, yeah. We're back with in a moment with the latest on Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine. Stay with us.
We were looking forward to seeing you at our open house, but things are different this year. Last year, we raised more than $1 million for local food banks across BC. We're not going to let 2020 stop us.
It's great to see you.
Especially at a time when the food banks need support the most.
I'm so glad you asked.
Join us online and on Radio 1 for CBC British Columbia's Food Bank Day on December 4th. The UK has become the first Western country to approve a COVID-19 vaccine. The government insists it hasn't cut corners with Pfizer's vaccine. But as Renee Filipponi tells us, being first comes with its own concerns.
On the day England emerged from its second national lockdown, there was hope in the news.
It is the protection of vaccines that will ultimately allow us to reclaim our lives.
The Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine got the green light from UK regulators, who reviewed clinical trials that showed it was 95% effective. It's the first Western vaccine to get approval.
Separate teams have been working in parallel to deliver the most rigorous review of this vaccine. No corners have been cut.
Doses are being boxed at the manufacturing facility in Belgium. Hundreds of thousands will arrive in days, with millions more to come after. It will be offered first to the elderly in care homes and staff, followed by people over 80 and health workers. Each person will need 2 jabs.
This is phase 1 of the program. In phase 1, we hope that 90 to 99% of people who are at risk of dying from COVID-19 will be included or covered.
But it needs to be stored at minus 70 degrees, which is creating challenges for mass inoculation. The government admits it's still working on solutions. The UK approval has been characterized as hasty by European regulators, who plan to make their decision later this month. And the speed has created some skepticism the government is trying to counter. Today in London, there was guarded optimism.
I'd probably let them test it on a few other people first, just to make sure it's safe.
I have no qualms whatsoever. I don't see any other scenario for people if we're to return back to a normal circumstance.
The government warns a return to normal is many months away. A mass vaccination program will take time, which means there are still some dark months ahead in the fight against COVID. Renee Filipponi, CBC News, London.
Well, the coronavirus vaccine developed by Pfizer has been authorized for emergency use in the UK. Health workers there could start getting vaccinated as early as next week. Health Canada is also looking at the Pfizer data. The process here is independent of other reviews around the world. And there's good reason for that, according to Dr. Samir Gupta.
It's important for each jurisdiction to have their own process. You know, there are examples of drugs that, for example, the FDA has approved in the past, we haven't, and vice versa. And we also know that sometimes there is political interference. We've heard about this recently at the FDA. So I think Canadians want to know that we have our own independent scientific review process.
He expects the Health Canada approval process for the Pfizer vaccine to be completed by the end of the month.
And in the global race for a vaccine, one significant age group is being almost completely ignored. Children can't use vaccines developed for adults. Christine Birak tells us why and explores the implications for you when kids are at the back of the line.
This is a COVID-19 vaccine trial
16-year-old Caitlin Evans was the first participant in Pfizer's COVID vaccine trial for children. Since early October, others as young as 12 have enrolled.
And you're all done.
No COVID vaccine can be widely given to kids until it's tested on them. Their immune systems are more active than adults, often prompting stronger reactions. But few companies are currently conducting trials. Moderna just announced it plans to start testing its vaccine doses in children next year.
I think it's very important to be able to study this vaccine or these vaccines in children because kids are not just small adults.
Children aren't a small player in this pandemic either. They're a fifth of Canada's population. And while they only make up around 1.4% of COVID hospitalizations, they account for over 15% of cases. That's more than 50,000 infections. Studies have also shown kids older than 10 are just as likely as adults to infect others.
Many pediatricians are advocating strongly to have children included in these vaccine trials.
While it's normal for vaccines to be tested for safety and efficacy in adults first, at the current pace, it's not clear when a vaccine will be ready for kids.
I'm curious why. Why have they waited and not done studies yet for children?
Amazing. Good job.
Lindsay Noon has 3 children under the age of 5. She and her husband are both teachers. They acknowledge the social and psychological toll this pandemic is taking on kids, but
I want them to definitely dissect everything that needs to be done to make sure it's safe.
Drug makers insist vaccines for kids will be thoroughly tested, but it's almost certain they'll be going back to school next September without a vaccine. Christine Birak, CBC News, Toronto.
Overseas, India is one of the countries hardest hit by COVID-19. The pandemic has affected every aspect of life in that country and has had dire consequences for tens of millions of vulnerable children. Some are being forced to beg, others are being forced to take work illegally. The CBC's Salima Shivji has that story.
The bustle of New Delhi's railway station, even in slower COVID times, is the perfect cover. A breeding ground for child traffickers. This young boy tried to get away from his captors, one of them his own brother. The social workers patrolling the platforms hear that often. Desperate families with no other options.
We can't say anything to them. They are vulnerable, marginalized people.
This child helpline is busier these days. COVID-19 has made an already desperate situation much worse. These 2 boys picked up at the same train station don't want to be here. They feed lie after lie to the counselor trying to help them. Until the bravado breaks. The terror of being sent back home with no money, too much for him.
It's a very much probability that they have come for work. Since schools are locked down and nobody is studying.
In India, it's illegal for children under 14 to work unless it's in a family business. But that law is powerless to protect so many in this country.
Particularly in a pandemic that has wreaked havoc on India. A swift and severe lockdown abruptly shut schools, leaving children with nowhere to go, pushing the poorest and most vulnerable to the edge. Rescue homes like this one try to teach basic skills to children who can't return to their families, anything to help them escape crippling poverty.
I prefer to call nowhere children. They are not on the radar. They are not visible. Visible means they are not accounted for.
For the parents of these children now in the hands of child welfare authorities, it's also a struggle. Out in the hallway, Poonam tries to catch a glimpse of her 3 older boys, detained while begging on the streets a month ago. The lockdown was the worst time she's ever been through, she says. Her husband, an addict, had already left the family. They were all starving, living on less than 3 cents a day. She gets only a few short minutes with her sons at a distance, but that's enough. She doesn't want them back. Convinced this is the only hope they have of surviving. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Delhi.
Back here at home, Alberta is calling on the federal government and Canadian Red Cross for help. New infections in that province are up to nearly 1,500 a day. As Carolyn Dunn explains, officials want field hospitals created just in case the situation gets even worse.
Alberta already has one COVID field hospital, which only came into use this fall. But with hospitalizations and ICU capacity stretched and in some cases overflowing, tonight it's asking for help so that it's ready to build more. As CBC News first reported, Alberta has asked the Red Cross about providing 2 field hospitals and the federal government about 2 more, if and when existing hospitals are overwhelmed. The Premier says it's for contingency planning, not needed immediately.
While there are about 16 hospitals under significant stress right now, and a lot of healthcare workers are exhausted, the reality is that we have and can continue to create capacity, as we expect, quite bluntly, the hospitalization numbers to go up, given the new cases in the last few weeks.
Public safety hasn't received a formal request from Alberta yet, or any other provinces and territories. Both federal and provincial sources say discussions so far do not include any plans to staff the field hospitals, a concern to those who have been raising alarms about healthcare capacity.
I do have concerns about our ability to staff 4 field hospitals in the province. We are already very stretched thin with the staffing we have available for the hospitals that we have right now.
There is some flexibility left in the healthcare system by canceling surgeries, for example, and redeploying qualified staff to COVID care. But the bigger concern from some doctors is what expanded medical capacity will do without tougher public health restrictions.
This basically means that our health system is inevitably going to be overwhelmed, and the fact that the province is asking for federal intervention for field hospitals but has not instituted a lockdown is completely negligent.
CBC's Carolyn Dunn reporting from Calgary tonight.
Well, the federal government has admitted it will not meet its own deadline for lifting all boil water advisories in First Nations communities. As Tom Perry tells us, Ottawa says the pandemic is among the reasons for the delays, and it's promising more money to help.
And today, we're making ourselves accountable. We're making future governments accountable.
From federal Liberals today, an acknowledgement they've fallen short on a signature pledge.
And while there have been many reasons for the delay, I want to state as clearly as possible that ultimately I bear the responsibility for this, and I have the responsibility and the duty to get this done.
The Liberals promised in the 2015 election to lift long-term boil water advisories in all First Nations communities.
Because it's not right in a country like Canada that this has gone on for far too long.
The goal to do it by March of next year.
Because of COVID, many projects lost a full construction season. And this shouldn't be a surprise to anyone.
The government now says the pandemic and other factors have put that goal out of reach.
The Liberal government has just acknowledged that they will break a commitment to the Indigenous people for clean drinking water.
We remain aggressively committed to lifting all long-term advisories and ensuring First Nations can have clean water now and into the future.
Ottawa is promising an extra $1.5 billion to continue work. That's on top of more than $2 billion already committed.
I welcome those announcements today, but as I said, these are resources that we've been waiting for a long time.
The Liberals say they have lifted nearly 100 long-term drinking water advisories. Roughly 60 still remain. The government hopes to have that down to perhaps a dozen by spring, but the work isn't over. Tom Perry, CBC News, Ottawa.
One of Hong Kong's best-known pro-democracy activists has been sentenced to 13.5 months in jail. Joshua Wong pleaded guilty to 2 charges related to an illegal protest in 2019. The rally near police headquarters came during a wave of demonstrations against an extradition bill that was later withdrawn. 2 of Wong's associates have also been sentenced to several months in prison. International rights groups have been quick to condemn the ruling.
Still ahead, BC's COVID-19 surge is now the strongest in areas outside the Lower Mainland. Just ahead, our Justin McElroy tells us why cases are up almost 500% in the rest of the province over the past 3 weeks. Stay with us.
large proportion of the patients who have taken psychedelic chemicals such as LSD and mescaline at this hospital were alcoholics. It was after reading an account in the Yale University Quarterly Review on Alcoholism Studies of this hospital's results using LSD that David first went to them with his drinking problem. He had become completely dependent on alcohol, unable to get through a day without it. Drinking had become a compulsion which he could no longer control.
I'd had help before. I spent 2 weeks in the clinics operated by the Ontario Alcoholism Foundation. I'd attended group therapy sessions. I had a brief flirtation with AA. I tried willpower. I had several times asked the doctors I saw about LSD, of which I'd heard, but the doctors I talked to either didn't know much about it or didn't approve of it. In my first interview here, the medical director stressed the fact that the treatment using LSD was no cure. He also stressed the point that LSD was not, by itself, even a treatment for alcoholism. The use of LSD and mescaline were only a part of an overall treatment program. An important part, but still only a part.
The purpose of the towel over the patient's eyes is to shut out the distraction of the room and the objects in it, to direct the whole of the patient's attention and heightened awareness inward. As used at this hospital, LSD and mescaline are said to trigger a psychedelic or mind-manifesting experience. This is an overwhelming, transcendental psychic experience in which the whole of a man's life and personality can be laid bare before him. During a session with LSD and mescaline, a patient is able to break through the normal defenses of his conscious mind for a clear, hard look at what he really is. To aid him at critical moments in this inner examination of himself, the hospital staff must know as much as possible about the patient prior to the session.
You also have an interview with the staff psychiatrist and with the resident therapist. You are given a series of psychological tests, and they run the usual round of normal hospital tests, and you are given a complete physical examination. You are asked to write an autobiography following an 18-part guide furnished by the hospital. This covers everything.
By this time, it has been decided by the hospital whether or not a patient is likely to benefit from the treatment using LSD and mescaline. Not everyone who asks is given it, and many who had never heard of it when they first came to the hospital are given it.
A look at some of the stories we're following tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
That it was several dozen families that were affected, several businesses that were affected, long-term care that was affected.
Dr. Bonnie Henry talking about how an old-timers adult hockey team from BC traveled to Alberta, brought back COVID-19, and spread it throughout their interior community. At the same time, she announced tighter restrictions on adult indoor team sports.
Dr. Henry also announced 834 new cases of COVID-19 in BC and 12 more deaths since yesterday. The number of patients in hospital has risen to another new high of 337, including 79 in critical care. Current orders restricting social interactions, recreational activities, and regional travel are set to expire come Monday. Henry says she won't know if they need to continue until then.
It's actually now Monday to Friday, a 4-hour package shift. And that's all that person does is receive packages, log packages, and be prepared to hand them out.
Building managers are going to great lengths to keep up with the onslaught of online deliveries. The pandemic has paved the way for an unprecedented number of people shopping from home. It's created some seasonal jobs, simply sorting packages for high-density high-rises, while delivery companies struggle to get everything where it needs to go on time.
After containing outbreaks to the lower mainland for the most part until now, BC is starting to develop a dangerous trend when it comes to COVID-19 surges.
As Justin McElroy explains tonight, while cases have stabilized in Vancouver Coastal Health and doubled in Fraser Health, they've gone up by nearly 500% in the rest of the province.
For months now, the story in British Columbia of COVID has been the same. More than 90% of cases centering in the Lower Mainland. But that is beginning to change. While active cases in the Lower Mainland have stabilized over the last week, they're rising, and quickly, in the rest of the province, doubling approximately every 5 days to the point where there is now more than 1,000 active cases on Vancouver Island, Interior Health, and Northern Health. To Premier John Horgan, it's a sign that everyone in the province should be vigilant.
We have been warning communities since March that COVID-19 is in British Columbia. We are in the midst of a global pandemic. There is no safe place. None of us has COVID-19. That was the last spot in Canada to have the virus arrive and to devastating consequences. We need British Columbians to understand that.
One thing the Premier isn't committing to is releasing detailed data about outbreaks in communities when they get them for the first time. It's a concern in Revelstoke, where they weren't alerted to a community outbreak until there were 22 cases. Now there are more than 40. However, with cases rising across the province, it's unlikely that the restrictions put in by the government 2 weeks ago are going to relapse anytime soon. Justin McElroy, CBC News, Vancouver.
Hundreds of thousands of Canadians are coping with brain disorders like Parkinson's and epilepsy.
Now, new technology is offering a way to control symptoms by providing a live stream of a patient's brain.
In a Canadian first, a Toronto team is already changing lives with the high-tech treatment. Lauren Pelly has the details in this exclusive story.
We can actually stream live from his brain.
Gord Luke has been coping with Parkinson's disease for the last 6 years. A team from the Krembil Brain Institute just implanted electrodes deep into his brain to help control his symptoms. Plus, a newly approved device in his chest will capture his brain activity.
We're going to see now what happens when we increase the stimulation, for instance.
Through a computer, neurologist Dr. Alfonso Fasano can tweak the settings, improving Luke's tremors.
You can increase with the remote control that you have.
The 66-year-old from Wawa, Ontario, will eventually be able to control it himself at home, while his medical team, a 10-hour drive away, will have access to around-the-clock recordings of his brain signals.
This will be, like never before, a window into their activities.
The electrodes are a decades-old technology known as deep brain stimulation. The new device being implanted in patients' chests was just approved this fall by Health Canada. It sends electrical signals through thin wires to a targeted area of the brain while offering the real-time recording. Before this technology, the only time physicians would have gained this much insight into someone's brain was during brain surgery.
What this new device allows is, whether it's the first day after surgery or even 5 years after the surgery, we can interrogate the device now and listen to the patient's brain.
This neurosurgeon says it works like keeping a diary.
The patient at home can indicate in a computer whether they're having a symptom like tremor. They can indicate when they've taken their medication. And when they come back to us, we can look at their brain diary, if you will, and understand at what points of the day their symptoms were severe, what points they were better, and then fine-tune and adjust the therapy.
Yesterday, I could hardly walk. Today I'm getting around not bad.
Luke hopes his high-tech implants help keep his symptoms at bay while he's back home in Northern Ontario.
Looking forward to spending more time outdoors.
All thanks to technology implanted here in Toronto, thousands of kilometers away. Lauren Pelly, CBC News, Toronto.
Still to come tonight, how Prince Edward Island is hoping a new project will make that province a little bit greener.
And at 6:42, a live look at downtown Vancouver. There's BC Place all lit up. Well, after the fog cleared, it was a gorgeous day around the south coast. Hope you enjoyed it, because the clouds and showers are set to return tomorrow. Johanna has the 5-day forecast next.
Luna came to us just over a year ago, and you'll notice she does not have any eyes. Hi, Luna. So she hasn't been able to see, I guess, since she was born. She was at a dairy farm for 12 years. She came here the day that she was going to be headed to the slaughterhouse. She was chained on either side so that her options were stand up, lay down, one step forward or one step back. So her hind leg muscles were pretty much non-existent. She would actually rub her raw eyeballs on wood or whatever she could get at to try to scratch them. So it was just a matter of time before she either perforated her eyeball and it would become an emergency surgery. Hi, sweetheart. We looked for a very long time to find somebody who could do the procedure. They didn't want to take her at many clinics due to the fact that she's large and blind. There was a vet who came. He actually did the surgery and he did it free of charge. Her surgery was about 4 hours, and being in the middle of December, it was extremely cold, below freezing temperatures. Having never been outside for 12 years, you'd think she would be terrified, and she came out and just started exploring that first day. So she tried to run and jump. She was just so excited to be out here, and she just completely fell down. She got back up and she just kept trying. You can see her eyes, they healed up really well. She kind of has a little bit of a scar, and strangely enough, she still blinks. So like if you touch near her eye, she still has a complete blink reflex, which is normal. It's just kind of odd to see. Since the surgery, she will headbutt the babies, so she'll actually push them around and play like a normal cow would. Before, she would never let us touch her face or anything because she was so sensitive. She's just a completely different girl since that procedure. She has no idea that she's blind. I think she just thinks that's normal. Luna is an inspiration just in terms of what she's kind of overcome. Oh my goodness. Every day, Luna teaches us to be resilient. Even though she doesn't have her sight, she lives a completely happy and meaningful life.
Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas!
Market Report is brought to you by Fortis BC. We've got even bigger rebates.
Rebate?
Whoa! On select high-efficiency equipment for business, but only for a limited time.
Let's bring back our meteorologist, Johanna Wagstaffe, for another look at the forecast. And Joe, I just want to loop in our viewers on what a great asset you are, because not only do you join us live on this show, but at 7, 8 in the morning, you send out a personalized email to the entire newsroom with our very own forecast for the day. It's my favorite thing, and today's was no exception. I loved what you're talking about these days with the high pressure systems.
Aw, thanks for the shout out. Yeah, I can't send the personalized forecast out to everyone, but yeah, so I love doing the analysis in the morning, and then I get to take a moment with the little guy and the big dog. So I'm glad you're reading it, and I'm glad I was able to deliver good news with the high pressure system. We've got it sticking around for a few more days. That doesn't mean I'm not going to start dialing it in like a certain meteorologist in LA in the movies, but there are some changes coming as we head into the forecast. So let me start off with the big picture. Take a look at the satellite. The forecast satellite where we do have some clouds, as I mentioned earlier, moving into our neck of the woods for tomorrow afternoon. That's because this high pressure system is shifting eastward just for a moment, and that's allowing this low pressure system to sneak into the coast. So everyone on the coast looking at a few showers, some freezing rain and snow for higher elevations like Terrace and Stewart, seeing some snow all the way down the Rockies. It doesn't stay for long. Watch the corner of your screen. That high pressure realizes it's drifted too far and moves back into BC, kicking that moisture out. So we get the sun back as we head into Friday and the weekend. 2 out towards Cranbrook, 4 in Kelowna tomorrow. Some cold wind chills to start. Kamloops is a 4. We've got the showers, though, continuing in through Prince Rupert. And again, risk of freezing rain for inland coastal sections because temperatures will be hovering around the 0-1 degree mark. Up towards Dees Lake, we've got a -1. And Fort Nelson, I was looking at your forecast as well, mix of sun and cloud. So everyone's sort of sharing in this high pressure. We're cold and clear. I mentioned earlier, the temperatures to the east of the Rockies actually hitting 15, 16 degrees as we head into the weekend. So we're sort of on the wrong side of the high for the heat, but we do get to keep the clear skies. Temperatures quite chilly tonight, getting down to the freezing mark. As we head into Thursday night, actually might be a little warmer because of that cloud cover. And again, just a slight risk of a shower Thursday night into Friday. Friday, clearing out for a gorgeous afternoon. And Saturday, temperatures bump up a little bit. Looks like a lovely blue sky day. At first, I thought the first few model runs this week looked like those Monday showers might sneak into Sunday, but more and more, I think they'll hold off until the start of next week. It does look like next week does return to a more showery pattern. But all in all, not a bad next 5 days. And it was Steve Martin I was thinking of. The meteorologist. I'll tweet out the movie that he was in where he just dials in the forecast every day because he's in LA. Right. We don't have the same luxury here in Vancouver.
No, it's kind of like being in Phoenix or Scottsdale or somewhere.
Exactly.
Thanks,
not us.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Well, a new company on Prince Edward Island is hoping its new project will make the province a little greener.
As Travis Kingdon reports, it involves buying an old car and converting it to an electric vehicle.
From the front, it looks like a normal Toyota Corolla, but the engine's out and the back half has been removed, all in preparation for its new life as an electric pickup truck.
One of the big goals of the company is to produce greener cars than you can buy today on the market.
It's a project by Upcycle Green Technology, an auto shop in Summerside that's designed to be eco-friendly. The electric vehicle conversion fits into its mission statement. Staff say it's better to convert an old car to run on electricity than it is to buy a new electric vehicle.
If you convert a used car, you save twice as well, because you are not producing CO2 during the production, you are not producing CO2 during the use.
Anadini says when cars are scrapped, material like plastic and rubber ends up in the dump. The goal to use all of those raw materials in retrofitting the car, like this piece of metal salvaged from the roof. He says the finished product will save people money too, as there's no need to replace things like oil and coolant. For that reason, Anadini hopes to market the car as a fleet vehicle for governments and small businesses so they have a smaller, eco-friendly alternative.
People here love big pickup trucks. For me, that's good. I love it too. I love cars anyway. But I think there's some steps you have to use now to go to the right direction in the future. And the big pickup trucks, the big cars, any car bigger than you need is a waste.
Though this car doesn't move under its own power yet, it will soon. The engine has been ordered and the batteries are on the way. Anadini says he hopes to finish the first vehicle by the end of the month and have more on the road by early next year. Travis Kingdon, CBC News, Charlottetown.
Lego Justin Trudeau, how one father and son team is making their passion for bricks into theater. It's coming up right after the break.
This really started after a conversation both of us had. We had a conversation about race and we were sharing each other's experiences. And she shared a lot of information that I really appreciated her sharing. And I remember when I got back home, I really enjoyed the conversation. And I was wishing that we could have more like that, but also get perspectives from different people that weren't in our friendship group. So I texted her the next day, asking her if she would be interested in starting a group like this. And she was all on board. She wanted to do something like this herself.
It just clicked for me, I guess. It felt like something, why didn't I think of this? You know, this is such a great idea. Let's do it. I'm sure, like us, there are others in the Saskatoon community who are feeling the same way and who might not have a healthy outlet, because it can be pretty isolating sometimes, especially, I mean, I can only really speak to my own situation, but in my professional life, it's a little bit isolating because there aren't a lot of persons of color or BIPOC in my, for example, in my work. And so especially now with COVID-19 going on and all of us trying to be responsible, not being able to go out as much, it felt really great to be able to provide something for the community that could unite us all.
A lot of the things that she shared in that conversation are things that I felt, but I didn't tell anybody, because I felt like they're not going to believe me. They're going to think of every other excuse why it's not race related. And it's just something that I repressed for most of my life because I didn't feel like I would be validated in that way. So I really like that we created a space where people can express the things that they have experienced and have it returned with support and acceptance.
While I do have a few close people that I can vent to about these things, I still don't always feel empowered to have these conversations. And I'm sure that others don't either, because, you know, we've been, either gaslit or made to feel like this isn't an important theme or dismissed. And so that's one of our goals for this group. And I think it's a very meaningful goal for all of us to be able to have these important conversations when they are affecting our personhood and our well-being. But I couldn't stress enough the importance of representation from everyone, every single cultural group, everyone. Like this place is inclusive because we felt excluded for so long.
CBC British Columbia's Food Bank Day is going to look a bit different this year, but it's still in support of an important cause, local food banks across BC. Join us online and on Radio 1, December 4th.
Welcome back. A Winnipeg dad and his two sons are making entertaining use of their downtime, and they're sharing their work publicly once again.
Yeah, earlier this year, Tyler Walsh and his sons made this Lego-themed stop-motion video. It reenacted the Prime Minister's message to children about COVID-19. When Justin Trudeau learned about it, he happily recorded his message in French. Then in May, Walsh and his boys, aged 10 and 13, released another video thanking frontline healthcare workers. And on Sunday, the Winnipeggers shared their latest creation, a message from Santa. Have a look.
Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas to all the children of the world. I was just taking Blitzen for a test drive. I'm speaking to you here from the North Pole. Now, 2020 has been a pretty tough year for all of us, and this Christmas might look a little different, but that's okay. I know many of you have written to ask if I will still be able to visit your home, and I'm thrilled to say yes. Our team has received clearance from all the countries of the world to deliver presents to you. And here at the North Pole, We are taking your safety and the safety of all elves very seriously. From the moment we receive your letter, know that we have taken every measure to ensure you are safe. And one final message. Your parents have been through a lot this year, so I want you to be extra good. Listen to your parents and be thankful for all they've done for you. Now, I have to continue to get prepared for the big day. What do you think of my new safety suit? Be kind, be safe, be fun, and most of all, Merry Christmas!
All right, everyone, back to work.
Our producer Matthew just said in our ears that his son, who's 6, loves to make these. I think he called it the Elf Workshop. It's the latest Lego roundout for Christmas. Boy, they're pretty cute.
Well, producer Matthew should then step it up and make a video like that.
That's true. We can present it on set.
Yeah, and get the guy doing the Santa voice. Would that be the dad, maybe? It's pretty impressive.
I guess so, yeah. Anyway, you can always find our news program online at cbc.ca/BC. Our next local news is right here at 11 o'clock with Dan Burritt after the National. Good night.
Good night.